Hey, this is Sandy.
And Randy.
And we're here on AT Corner.
Being an athlete trainer comes with ups and downs, and we're here to showcase it all.
Join us as we share our world in sports medicine.
Welcome back to another episode of AT Corner. We're back, 2025, here we are.
Happy New Year!
Yes, and I think we are kicking off the new year in a very positive way.
We are talking about coach stories.
Yes, but this time it's the positive side. We're talking about good coach stories.
Yes, and I think a lot of us, when we think about coach stories, you probably think of all the times that it's been fun working with some not so fun coaches.
Yes.
But because we spent one of our last episodes talking about how to work with difficult coaches, we thought what better way to kick off the new year with the thing that I feel like people don't spend enough time talking about, and that is working with just hands down amazing coaches.
Yeah, I think this kind of gives that perspective where I feel like it's easy to hear about the horror stories of like difficult coaches and coaches you don't like working with. Whereas, I feel like we don't do like it doesn't get talked about enough of all the great coaches that we've worked with, and like that like it's not always just, oh, coaches are just terrible. No, there are a lot of great coaches, and I feel like we need to celebrate that a little bit more.
Exactly.
And plus, what better way to start the year with some positivity?
Going into 2025 with some good omens.
Yep, good vibes.
Good vibes. Only. So one of the first things that I did ask on our Instagram stories this week was, have you ever worked with an amazing coach? And 95% of people said yes.
That's awesome.
I think
really
that just goes to show you that it's so much easier to share the negative stories and highlight and focus on the times that because you get that shock factor.
Yeah. Well, and plus, not saying misery, not trying to use that as an example. It's kind of true. Misery likes company.
That's exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So everyone can relate to a venting session.
Otherwise, it feels like bragging. My coaches are so great.
Whatever.
But honestly, I wonder this all the time. I wonder, how AT is a lot of time, they talk about one of the hardest parts of the job sometimes can be working with a difficult coach. I wonder how often coaches are around and they're like, oh gosh, one of the most difficult parts of a job is when the ATs they just exist.
just being
18, just being an AT.
18.
I wonder because I feel like we only get the AT side,
That's true. And I might be biased, but I feel like there's a lot of other admin stuff that would be more of a thorn.
I don't know. We can definitely be a thorn.
We can definitely be a thorn, but I feel like there's administratively, I feel like there's other thorns that might be more bothersome. But again, I do have the biased view of being an athletic trainer, so
that's true. So I did put our first story in as just a way to kick us off from Erica M. Do you want to kick this one off?
Yes, Erica says, one of my favorite coach stories is from when I was working at the college with an athlete who was dealing with the aftermath of a concussion. He had successfully rehabbed from his first one, sustained another upon returning to play, and had significantly longer lasting post-concussion symptoms. That's sad. Poor guy.
Mm-hmm.
From the athletic training room, I pulled out all the stops, connecting with his professors individually on navigating specific triggers, getting him into a study with Dr. Tina Shetty. This was in the prime of the NFL scandal. Ooh, that was a time.
Mm-hmm.
That was a time. Keeping him involved with soccer as much as possible during the conditioning sessions and getting a vestibular therapist involved with his rehab. But nothing could have prepared me to get called up to a meeting in his coach's office one day where I found the head and assistant coaches of both our soccer team and our track and field team. Together, the coaches had decided that if I came to the conclusion that he'd be medically unable to return to soccer, they were prepared to not only continue to honor his scholarship as planned, but to bring him on the track team so that he did not lose access to the non-monetary benefits of being part of the student-athlete community. He was one of our faster soccer players, to be sure, but not in comparison to our D1 Conference Championship track team. They also told me they wanted to honor this offer even if I medically cleared him, but he did not feel comfortable risking a third concussion in light of the NFL reports. The fact that they stayed so on pace with his rehab and decided that they wanted to give him other paths forward based on where he was at that moment was so touching to me. And I love the fact that they wanted to bring me into the decision before presenting it to him or the athletic director. The happy ending is that he went on to return to play and have a successful military career after college. But it's one of my favorite memories of those two coaches and so on brand with the way they both treated their athletes. That's awesome.
Right?
That's really cool.
There are so many things about this story, but the fact that like Erica was valued and not only just they didn't just like tell her that she was valued, but like showed that.
Yeah.
And showed that to the athlete as well and showed the trust that they had in that connection. There's just so many things that like I actually did dive into this a little bit more, and we will in the episode later. Like, does it start out this way working with a coach, or does it build this way?
Yeah.
So we will talk about that. I talk about building the perfect coach, how coaches show value.
Yeah.
For athletic trainers, building that relationship, how current coaches could communicate better.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, what has helped you build a relationship with a coach? So like what can ATs do to get all these positive things that we're going to be talking about?
Nice.
So why don't we get started with building the perfect coach?
All right.
This is like
jumping into the lab.
Dream coach. What are you thinking of? What do you think of?
We're gonna Frankenstein this bad boy.
Yes. Bolts and all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the bolts are a must. I think that's number one. I think, man, I'm trying to think of elements of the perfect coach.
Well, have you worked with a perfect coach?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What were like your favorite parts about working with that coach?
I think it was really just the fact that we were able to like have a conversation about the status of a student athlete, right? Like it's not arguing. It's literally just having a conversation of, I can have a conversation to where I can say, what are your goals? Like, what do you need? Because I have this sense of trust with that person, right? So now I can get an idea of where they're coming from, what they need. Well, here's where we're at. How can we come to the middle? What's going to work out pretty well? I think just being able to have a conversation as opposed to an argument.
If they come to the table looking to converse.
Yes.
And looking to make that connection with you.
Absolutely.
That back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And also questions, like being able to, like, if you're confused about something, I would rather you just ask me instead of like trying to figure out or just like not have someone do anything at all because you didn't necessarily know the limitations.
Right.
Right. This particular coach that I'm talking about, like he did a really good job of, and the staff too, not just him, like the assistant coaches did a really good job. Like after I'd give them a recommendation, they may be doing a drill. They'll stop the drill or like they'll step off to the side. Hey, can this person do this? And a lot of times, like I'm not a coach. I didn't play soccer, right? So like I'm not familiar with the structure of practice as someone who's played. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'd have to say, can I see the drill first, right? Can I see it act out? And then if I see it, oh yeah, it looks great. Sure, they can probably do this. Or no, that's probably too much. Like that was really awesome. And it did help because I was out there, right? So I was at the practice. So that helped a lot. But I think it was just that, like being able to have a conversation. And then two, them just like being a person, right? Like, yeah, we talk about sports and we talk about like obviously our jobs, like, who's hurt and stuff like that. What do we need? Where are we at? But also just being able to say like, oh, how are you doing? How's life? How's this? Like that also makes a big difference. All
of those things that you touched upon are things that people talk about in different elements of this episode as well. Nice. But the biggest one that we got for building the perfect coach was active communication.
Yeah.
This is like basically like they are actively seeking out the athletic trainer to make sure that they know things.
Yes.
That is like, I think across the board and across every question I ask, this one came up as well.
Yeah.
Jenna J says, I had a coach for lacrosse last season like this. I had started later in the season as the previous AT had moved on. One of the first things my coach did was sit me down and tell me what players were working through injuries. I've never been more appreciative of a coach ever. This coach continued to communicate at least once a week about what my thoughts were on injured and returning players. I don't think I or my job had ever been validated more than that season.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, being able to actually seek you out and like acknowledging that you are there.
Right.
And being like kind of along the lines, like acknowledging that you are also part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that goes a long way for a lot of athletic trainers.
Right. That is another one that we'll talk about too. But I think that what also goes hand in hand with active communication is our second top answer, which was good listening.
Yeah.
Rebecca R says, what makes a relationship top tier? My coach listened. Low bar, I know, but it made it easier to listen to him and hear his concerns and compromise, or possibly see where I was being too cautious. Yeah. There's such a difference between communicating and listening, even with your athletes. Most of the time we know better, but an athlete knows their body, and honestly, sometimes a coach does too.
Mm-hmm.
Or a coach understands the necessities of the drill they had planned for that day. So instead of just saying out, listening to why they're telling you why their plan makes a difference. I had a women's lacrosse girl who I swear, broke her thumb. Like, stress tests, everything. Like, that thing flopped around. She didn't get an x-ray like I begged her to because tuning fork was positive, ultrasound was positive, Tinel tap positive, but after the weekend was over, she walked in and she was fine. Full range of motion, grip strength normal. I didn't listen to her. I mean, it's just like any other relationship. We just want to be heard, and the reciprocating party wants to be heard. It's that simple. Being heard makes anyone feel valued. And when you feel valued, you work harder, closer, and better together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, very true.
This, to me, the more and more that I work with coaches, the more I realize, like, yeah, it doesn't really matter the type of person. It's really your relationship with that person.
Yeah.
Because, like, I have had coaches who I am so close to, and they are absolutely not my favorite coaches to work with necessarily. Like, if I think of like my favorite coaches, like that, like these people might make the list, and I look at their traits and I'm like, oh, well, actually they were actually really bad at communicating, or like they were actually really bad at this. But you know what? That relationship really kind of, I knew that about those people, and everyone's going to have strengths and everyone's going to have their weaknesses, right? But I feel like being able to navigate those with a good, solid relationship, and you understanding and showing value is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just kind of thinking like the I kind of like that respect and like feeling heard kind of thing. It just got me thinking about like trust.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was the next top answer.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, the coaches that I like trust, like, I can like compromise with them more. I give them more. I can give them more leeway because I know they're not just gonna do something crazy. Right. So I think that that's huge. Because I'm just thinking back, like there were times like if it's a coach like I don't trust, it's absolutely like no, I don't want them doing this or this. Whereas if it's someone you can trust, they can be like, oh well, hey, we were kind of thinking about trying this. Okay, cool, sounds great. Right. You know, because you know they're not going to go overboard with what they told you or just tell you something to make you happy and then all of a sudden it just got a little out of hand. Right.
Trust and respect was the next one. Jenn B says, respects my time and opinion, knows I work with them and not for them. And I know I brought this up in also the last episode, or last coach episode. But I want to stress this so much, like scream this from the rooftops, like shout it from a mountaintop. We work with coaches. We do not work for coaches. And I think not enough coaches and not enough athletic trainers kind of put that into perspective and kind of realize that is the relationship like that's where it needs to start.
Yeah.
Because if you have a coach who thinks that you work for them, then when you're not doing things for them, that's where there's going to be conflict.
Yeah. And I think too, that just comes from people thinking of like professional sports, because it's like when like in football, like in the NFL, right? When like a new head coach comes into town, people just see, oh, he brings his staff and he brings all these people over, and they just assume, I mean, in some places it might be like that where like, oh, the AT staff might be gone after a new head coach, but not all places, right? But I think some people still kind of have that mentality that like it's a very professional kind of like, oh, well, pro sports do it. It's probably like, it's got to be like that everywhere. So I think that is where that probably breeds from.
If we do everything pro sports do, then how come I don't have 22 people running out to an injury?
Valid. That's true.
Curtis C says, a coach who refers to me for return to play decisions, even with doctor's notes.
You see, yeah. Again, questions.
Yes. Or just knowing that like we are, like this is our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So, you know, they get a random doctor's note, but who has final say?
Yeah. Or also like what to do with that. Like just because they're cleared to play, like, yeah, they're probably feeling great. That doesn't necessarily mean, okay, we're just back to normal.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just, again, questions. Not even like it's not even like coming like you don't know, just asking questions for clarifications, like just getting clarification on what the note says or what can we do with this person.
Another big one that on this one specifically wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be, but still, our last top answer is includes you as part of the team. This one from Anonymous says, the first coach I worked with out of undergrad immediately made me feel like part of the team. I had no issues discussing injuries or anything else relating to the team. They would even tell me I needed to be more assertive with them when discussing different things. And that is how you know they trust you and they respect you, because they're saying like, hey, listen, like your decisions have a place here. So like we can talk about it. So when they're talking about being more assertive, like the fact that they are able to, they feel like they're able to talk to this person and give them that feedback. Like that's great.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. That's really cool.
Some other answers: honest and straightforward, cares about evidence-based information about injuries, rehab, nutrition, training, etc.
Oh, I think that's a big one. Like, and not even like just open-minded. Like being open-minded to that, like times have changed. Like,
right.
We're not doing the same things we did in the 70s.
Oh my goodness.
And nor should we. Right? Because like not even from like a medical standpoint, but a sports performance standpoint, like if you practiced like everything they did in the 70s, right, you're going to get 70s outcomes. Right. But we're in 2025.
Right.
So I think that kind of open-mindedness and willingness to kind of like hear things out, I think is huge.
Willingness to collaborate, advocates for ATs, understands recovery is necessary, stays in their lane, doesn't try to do my job.
Yeah. Ooh, that one. Yes, that one's a big one. But also the understands recovery thing. I think it's a newer mindset that your recovery is just as important as your practice. And and I understand it from a coaching standpoint that like there's it's like teaching. You have so many ideas, you have to cover so much material, but you only have X amount of time. And I think like the really good coaches understand that, like, I understand I can't fit it all and I'm not going to try and force it. Right. I'm going to try and pick the important things that we need, you know, and then kind of go from there. Because there's nothing worse than, from what I'm seeing, like coaches try to play catch up. Like if like they're behind on something and now all of a sudden they're doing all these workouts and it's just like, it doesn't work that way.
Right. Or how about my favorite is like any football team that they're like, oh, they run a quick offense, so we have to do a bunch of conditioning this week. And I'm like, you need to do conditioning at least 6 weeks ago.
I was gonna say, yeah, that ship sailed. I'm sorry. These guys are not going to be in shape for that game. Right. If anything, they're going to be more tired now.
Right. This one from Anonymous says, understands what they see us do is the tip of the iceberg and puts effort in to see what we do outside of practices and games.
Yeah.
I really love this one. And I think something too that goes along hand in hand with this on the AT side is I feel like we have to do a better job of showing everyone in the athletics world what athletic trainers do. And I feel like there's a little bit of hesitancy with people getting frustrated that we have to do so much education. And so I think people are a little discouraged because they're like, why don't you just know what I do? Or they're like, oh, you're in the sports world, like, you know what I do, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like instead we need to like change our mindset and be like, this is an opportunity to educate. This is an opportunity to show you what I do. People don't know what you do. Think of like your head coach. Do you know how they recruit? Do you know like how they delegate that? Do you know how they like plan out the schedule or what they take into consideration? Like, you don't know all those nitty gritty details. You just see the outcome of it.
Yeah.
So like if you have someone who is coming back from injury, talk to your coach and tell them what you're doing and what you're trying and like what techniques or like how you're getting them. Like, oh, I spent all day calling the doctor's offices to try to get them in sooner, or like I spent all day on the insurance like trying to get this covered, or, you know, talk to your coaches and kind of give them more things of what you're doing rather than just so they're like, you just pull my kids.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great that reminded me of a great story of for one of my track kids, and this was track season, distance runner, had like kind of had chest pain, and kind of like shortness of breath. So we're like, okay, like, you need to see a doctor. Like, we need to make sure the heart's fine. And of course, this is getting closer to conference because, well, why not? And like, this kid had a chance to score. Like, not score high, but it was going to be points. So, of course, my distance coaches and head coach are, like, on edge whether this kid's going to be good. And obviously, we can't have him run until he's seen by the doctor because, you know, can't have the kid's heart stop while he's on the trail. So, you know, we referred him to our team doc referred him to a cardiologist, which, if anyone's tried to make an appointment with a cardiologist, it's impossible, right? It takes forever.
Yes.
Now try telling that to athletics, where the appointment for the cardiologist should have happened before he even had a heart issue or symptoms of it. Right? So I remember I tried every day, multiple times a day, to get this kid into the cardiologist. And the problem is with like school insurances, like a lot of times, like, you don't just have like an ID number. You don't have a policy number. So when you're trying to tell a front desk who in a cardiology office, they're not necessarily like dealing with student athletes all the time. So they're not familiar with what the school's insurance.
Or sometimes you like submit the claim and then you have to wait for the number to be generated. Yeah. But that's like not the same day.
Yeah. So then they're like, oh, well, what's the insurance? And like, oh, you explain to them what it is. And like, okay, what's the policy number? I'm like, I don't have one. And they're like, oh, well, no, can't do that. Right. So anyhow, right, this whole thing. And the coaches, they're not being like, they're just like, what's going on with this kid? Blah, 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 blah. And they just kept, like, they would kind of not terribly, but they just keep asking. Finally, our head athletic trainer was like fed up with it. And what's funny is the distance coach, like, he understood it. Like, he would just ask and it's like, that was it. But the head coach would just kind of go on about it. And she finally lost it and just was like, you know what? He's been doing this. You guys should be thankful that he's like doing this. Do you know how hard it is? And like the look on the assistant coach for the distance was like, I think he pooped himself because he was not ready for that. And then the head coach was like, oh yeah, okay. So that made me think of that. So yes, sometimes it is important.
No, you have to show what you do. Like, I think people just take this for granted.
Yeah.
And they're like, I do so much for your team. Like, why don't you appreciate me? But it's like, they just take it for granted because you're not necessarily going above and like, you are going above and beyond, but you're not necessarily telling them like you're going above and beyond.
Yeah.
So how are they going to, there's so many other things that are prioritized. If you're cool as a cucumber and you just kind of make everything look easy, like they're going to think everything's easy.
I was going to say, you know what, to our credit then, with how many times like that kind of becomes an issue, we just make everything look easy.
We do.
That's how good we are. So yes, that's a good point. Like we do make everything look easy, but educating them on what this process looks like.
Right.
That what we're doing. And I think the one thing that does help is like, I think like a lot of them do realize, like when you tell them, oh, you're trying to make this appointment, like they're adults, they've made an appointment for themselves and they kind of know like, shoot, this like seeing a doctor takes forever.
Right.
So like, I think at least again, like the really good ones, I think would understand that you're like, hey, I'm trying to make this appointment, But
that's the thing is communication. If we communicate on our end, like I think it makes it so much easier for everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
The next question that I asked on our stories was, how has a coach shown your value? Top answer by far, team gear. Honestly, team gear is nice. I do have to say that, like, if you don't get team gear, it does kind of rub you the wrong way. The first time that I got football gear in like female football gear rather than
cool.
Yeah, that's cool. That absolutely, like, I feel so valued.
Yeah. It
rather
is.
than just like, oh, here's like, by the way, like still a lot of my coaches will say like, oh, I never order anything in smalls. Like, I'm tiny. Like, sorry that I am not the size of your athletes, and I'm not asking them to, like, I'm not asking them to order anything specific for me. But every time I say that, I'm like, every time I hear that, I'm like, oh, so basically
I'm not getting anything.
Right. I don't care about you enough to put in just one that is in your size.
It just shows that they're thinking about you.
Exactly. That's
and again, that you're a part of the team.
Right.
Which, we're there pretty much as the team is. And, if you're in a place where you travel, okay, you're with the team all the time.
Right.
So it is nice. Like, team gear is not the like end all be all, but when you don't get team gear, it does rub you the wrong way.
Right.
It's just kind of like, okay.
Or how about there was a basketball, like, thank all of our important people, basically. And they thanked like the strength coach and the admin and the janitorial staff and like literally everyone. Our athletic director, like, they thanked everyone except for us. That one
hurts, especially when it's like other support staff.
Right.
Then you're like, cool.
Right.
Real cool.
Right.
And you know what? I would like to think it's not malicious or on purpose, but it does hurt because then you were the afterthought.
Oh, yeah. Something that I actually didn't think about, but actually makes me feel very valued is our next top answer, introducing me to recruits during tour as a team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
actually
fun.
Just yesterday, one of our football coaches came in. I don't know where these are coming from, but he introduced me as our football queen.
Nice. That's a good title.
Last year, one of the coaches came in and they introduced me as what'd they say, football goddess? Is that what it was?
I can't remember now.
It was something like that. I was like, oh, wow, I've been promoted to goddess.
Yeah. That's pretty funny.
I don't know where they come up with these. So they just come in, but
you have to remember they were athletes too.
Yeah, you're right.
At one point. Right. So they still have the athlete mindset.
Right. So Courtesy says, at every parent meeting, my football coach introduces me as the best AT he's ever worked with.
Wow. That's really cool.
That's an honor.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think I've gotten that from one of my favorite coaches. Yeah, when he'd bring athletes, if I would get kind of like that, or
doesn't it just feel good?
Like, here's our guy.
Right.
Yeah.
And like when it's genuine.
Yeah. Like for sure.
Another person said they introduced me to prospective athletes as the boss.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's a good title.
Yeah, I think when they come around, and it's nice that even like the back and forth that like when they bring the recruits around, like I have my little spiel, but then I can also like show the back and forth trust that I have with the coaches.
Yeah.
And I think that's really nice because, and it's nice for the athletes to see that coming in. I always, as part of my spiel, I kind of go into like, this is the place where you come take care of business. This is not the place where, you know, you want to stay away from or stay out of. I know some ATs kind of have that mentality, or some coaches do, but that's not the culture that we run.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's positives and negatives of both, but just things that have worked for us, for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know I'd always enjoy those recruiting trips, but I feel bad because like I'm never remember those kids, and like I'm sure like I'm sure a few that have visited have ended up on the team, and I wish I would have remembered. I remember when you first came in. I never remember. I really wish I would.
You know what? One of them actually, I don't know if I fully remember the story, so hopefully I do, so I could tell it. But I remember one kid came in and I had said something like, I don't remember what I said, but I was like, basically like, you don't even remember who I am. And he was like, yes, I do. And then he was like, you were up there talking about this, your name's Sandra, and like blah, 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 all this stuff. And I was like, oh, you do remember me.
Was that from like the preseason meeting, or? It
was from one of the preseason meetings.
You know what's funny is I've gotten that too, like from our, like where I was at before we did this like huge orientation where like, I think it was a couple days. And like kids would go like room to room because, you know, we had a small campus.
Oh, that's like a big orientation.
Oh, it was a bit, because like you had to do your compliance stuff. You had to do all this stuff, right? So we just got it all done in one day, right? And part of it was, you know, my spiel. And like, I don't know, it's like after a while, it's rooms of people of sports that like weren't my sports, right? So I'm just giving it to everybody. And like there's people that remember me from that. And I'm like, now I feel bad. I don't remember you.
Right. Okay, next is involves ATs in team activities, like team dinners, banquets.
That's nice. That is nice.
Yeah.
Just the invite is nice.
Honestly.
Because again, it shows you're a part of the team. I thought about you.
My last banquet was a softball banquet, and the coaches like literally a couple minutes before they handed me the microphone, they're like, hey, we're going to hand you the microphone. And I was like, okay. Okay. Was not ready for that. The next one is says thank you.
Honestly, that goes a long
it.
way.
It does. It really does.
But it has to be a genuine thank you. Like
I feel like when people actually take the time to say thank you, I feel like most of the time
because there's some coaches that like after a game they'll say thank you, but it's just like it feels like a forced thank you.
Oh, I know. No, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I mean?
I think more like when they actually, so like I had a baseball coach who would like, after someone came back from injury, like if they had a great play, like he would literally turn to me, look at me and say, that was because of you.
Oh, that's nice. That's dope. I think the big ones are like, again, like I feel like you get it a lot during game days, which is again can be genuine. But the ones that I feel are really genuine are the ones that also say thank you on a day to day. Like when they're leaving for the day and like, oh, hey, thank you. You don't have to. You could just say, hey, have a good one. But you said, hey, thank you. Thank you for your help. Right. That feels more genuine than just on a game day. You're just like, oh, thank you. Like kind of like that. Right. Like a simple thank you does go a long way, especially
if they walk down the hallway, go to your office, go out of their way.
And again, it doesn't have to be every day, but like it just something that feels genuine. That thank you is just huge. Like it's just like, oh, you're welcome.
So this cool one from Kevin. He says they gave me a piece of his National Coach of the Year award.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really dope.
It just shows like the support. Like you are a part of that.
Again, yeah.
Like couldn't have done it without you.
Exactly. And it's true for like all the support staff, like everybody, right? Like just take it outside from like the actual sport performance stuff like us and strength coaches, but like even like the counselors, like your compliance officers, like the people who keep these kids eligible too.
Right.
Like that plays a huge role, because if they weren't there, the person that would have to do that is basically the coach.
Yeah.
And like that, like coaches already have a lot to manage between, making sure the kids have certain units, making sure like organizing a schedule, travel plans, all this stuff. And that hasn't even talked about go coach your sport.
Yeah.
And develop a practice plan.
And this is exactly what we're talking about with the whole relationship thing.
Yeah.
Like, go see what your coaches do outside of their what they tell you and what you see.
For sure. And I think that's the big thing is like, again, like you said, like that relationship, like having a conversation with coaches outside of just like your work stuff. Like I genuinely like to know like how they're doing, what's going on, what's their biggest stress. Like that, and that's really where you learn a lot. And especially where you really start to realize that coaching is much more than just coaching. Mm-hmm. There is so much admin that the coaches have to do, especially the head coach has to do, that I think kind of gets forgotten.
Oh, yeah. The next one is seeks out my opinion about injuries, injury prevention programs, etc. Like even outside of work. This I've seen like my coaches have come in and like asked about their own injuries, or like they trust me. They're like, oh, I'm not ready to go to a doctor yet. Like I want to hear what you say, or like, should I go to a doctor? Like they trust my opinion for their own body, or like they'll bring me their kids. And like that, I'm like, you trust me with your kid? That is like, thank you for showing me that you value my expertise.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely when they start asking about their injuries.
Yes. Also always says, please see AT after practices and games.
Yeah.
That's like, they're like top down showing like the athletes, hey, like
this is important.
I trust them. This is valuable. You need to go do this.
Yeah. Remember, LeBron spends $1 million on his body.
Yeah.
I need to start saying that to kids. Hey, LeBron spends $1 million just on his body, right? Guess what? You have access to that for free.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay. You don't have to pay me anything. You had to pay tuition, but.
So Kyung O actually shared a couple things. He says, I want to share what I appreciate about the coaches I work with and how I got better at working with coaches. 1, they treat ATs as part of the team for its success. I especially feel this when coaches introduce me to new recruits and parents, share practice plans, and ask for advice and ideas for training sessions. They don't forget to show appreciation once in a while. Coaches don't need to say thank you all the time or even at all, but it's rewarding when they recognize how hard you work for the student athletes and express that verbally. Building rapport with student athletes is important, but for me, it takes more effort to build rapport with coaches, and I'm still finding my way to be better. Things that really helped me were understanding what coaches do outside of coaching, showing them more respect, and getting involved with the team regardless of my role. Working with D3 and D2 collegiate coaches, I learned that there are so many things coaches have to do to take care of outside of coaching or on the court or field. That helped me better understand why they do certain things in a particular way and their concerns, especially with injuries, recovery time, even just seeing a physician. It also made me better at communicating with coaches. However, I still believe that not many coaches do the same thing for us. I know sometimes we just seem like we're water boys or water girls. I hope coaches will open up their minds to understand what we do outside of those practices and games to make our athletes healthier and the team more successful.
Yeah.
See, that's exactly what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It is a back and forth. All those things that like we can stand here all day and talk about like, oh man, like it's so frustrating that the coaches don't tell us about like practice changes or like whatever, but like do a little bit of self-reflection and realize like what things could I be better at communicating that maybe like you need to kind of open up that communication channel, or like I don't know all the things that my coach is doing, they don't know all the things that I'm doing. Maybe we need to like delve more into that.
Yeah for sure.
So moving on and going back to this idea of like these great work relationships, like how do they start? I did ask this on our Instagram stories, and I asked just the difference, really simple, just if it's start from the beginning, like if it's great from the beginning, or if it builds to get better over time. And it was actually almost a 50-50 split. 55% said it's usually great from the beginning, and then 45 said it usually builds to get better over time. So the thing that I really like about this is like basically like over half, a little bit over half of people said like it's great. Like pretty much like if you have like a great coach, like they're a great coach, they're a great coach, they're a great coach, right? The fact that it was just a little bit under half that it builds to get better over time tells me that it's not, you don't just have to find these like perfect coaches, right? Like it's your relationship, it's the back and forth, it's what you build out of it. So Christina S actually has some really good insight on this if you want to read this one.
My current boys basketball is really great. Understands injuries, always sends kids to me, gets me Jordan gear / shoes. We are sponsored. Mm-hmm. Includes me on group texts, wants me at everything. It's just nice. With my basketball coach, it has always been like that. I also have my boys soccer coach who is constantly thanking me and telling me I'm appreciated, which is really nice too. This coach wasn't the head coach when I first started. We had one heated altercation during COVID times when I tried to implement COVID rules. But once he became head coach, it was water under the bridge. We had a talk and things have been great since. I was really nervous once he got the head coach position because of the argument, but my first day out of practice, he wanted to start anew. And now we are good buds. I think it also helped that his kids go to my school and they love me. Oh, that's funny. Mm-hmm. Also, I wonder how much like switching to like the head coach role and like now you see more of the admin and why certain things were implemented. And now you're like, I got it.
You put on different shoes.
Yeah. Because again, like I feel like the assistant coaches have more of a hand in like the actual like just coaching part. And depending where you're at, like some assistant coaches obviously are delegated admin stuff, especially if they're full-time. But if they're like just part-time coaches, they're really just there to coach kind of. So I feel like, yeah, again, that just viewpoint is probably different.
See, this is also, I totally forgot to say this earlier. I was thinking about it, but something that I feel like a lot of ATs will do like a day in the life of an athletic trainer. And then they start with like filling up waters. It's like, if you don't want to highlight that we're like, if you want to show that we're more than like water boys, water girls, like don't show us filling up waters.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I fill up waters and then I tape the team and then like I go stand at the game and then like done. It's like, no, we do so much more than that. And that's the things people see. You need to like show all the things that like you are like, oh, I need to make a doctor's appointment for this person, or like, oh, I'm contacting the insurance, or oh, I have to go upload these documents, and all the things that people don't realize that we do.
Yeah.
They're never in those day in the life videos.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
This next one is anonymous. They said, I have had a lot of coaches before, but my current head coach and I have a really amazing bond. I think when coaches don't treat us as outsiders and welcome our input, it helps a lot more on the coach's end of things. He wasn't the most open of coaches in the past before me and credits my over-communication, organization, and rapport with the team the reason for him opening up more.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
This is what I was talking about, just the back and forth.
Yeah. And again, the change.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have a couple more topics. Next one being, how could your current coaches communicate better? We kind of talked about this in the last episode, so I'm kind of going to go through this pretty quickly. Just share some of the top answers we got. Obviously, communication was our top answer. Communicate any and all schedule changes. This one, again, like across the board, across everything was just big. I know one of my coaches actually just like a week or two ago forgot to tell me about a schedule change literally like is so good normally about telling me, and he actually felt so bad that he brought me iced tea. So like the next day. So I promise you there are coaches out there, and like people make mistakes. So sure. Like I totally didn't fault him because that's not normally his.
Again, it was one time.
Right.
It wasn't the regular.
Right. So even when you get those perfect coaches, like there's going to be mistakes, but I think in general, like we do appreciate that communication. How else can, like, I think, oh, you know what? This is why I asked this, because I say this in a lot of episodes, but I feel like we talk about like communication, like you need to communicate. We never talk about like how to communicate, right? One of the easiest things that a coach can do is just add an AT to a group chat.
I was gonna say that would actually solve the top one. That solve that schedule change as long as you're in the group chat, because you're getting the same thing that the athletes got.
Exactly. Like here's what I tell my coaches. Like, you tell like the athletes at some point, like every single person in this room has heard about the schedule change.
They all know.
So at one point it was communicated.
What's just one more number?
Right. This anonymous person said, the teams that have me in their group chat get the best care, and the difference is I know their schedules every single day in and out of season. Kids and coaches can contact me through the app when they have questions or need to see me, and being omnipresent makes them used to me, and it becomes natural to inform me of everything.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Like,
it's not like an outside entity.
Yeah, like feeling that you're accessible and like them just seeing you, it helps a lot.
See, that's exactly what I was talking about. Like when I used to go out, I mean, I still do now, but like my last school, I used to go a lot, like go out to baseball practice like a lot more, and it really was a game changer in getting the student athletes to come see me, because like they would like, they didn't have to seek me out. Like I was just available.
Yeah.
And so then when then like beyond that, I was able to get that buy-in and they were able to come in. But it was just like bridging that gap. Mm-hmm. It was like actually creating that space for them. More communication tips, responding to emails, texts, calls, in person, however way you communicate, actually like using that. I think that's also a big thing too, is like ATs will be like, I sent it in an injury report, but it's like, how many coaches check their emails?
It's true.
Right? So like maybe you need to tailor it and be like, oh, just like text the important parts, or like text them, hey, I just sent you an injury report. Yeah. Right? Or, you know, whatever. Read the injury reports. That was another
I think the biggest thing too, along with the read part, is like, please ask questions about the injury report. Right? Like, I'm sure there's a limitation on there.
Well, it's so hard to write things. Like I would so much rather communicate like in person or via phone call or like talking face to face. Like sometimes it's so hard to write something in writing because I feel like it's going to be taken so literally.
Yeah. I think too, like, I feel like if you come with questions about what the limitations are, you'll probably actually get to do more with that athlete than what you're probably initially thinking. Because again, I'm not the basketball coach. I'm not the soccer coach. I don't know all the drills. I don't know what you're doing that day. So like, I just have to make a blanket statement about like, hey, here are the things they cannot do. Right. Whereas if you have a question about like, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's what this drill kind of looks like. Oh yeah, they could probably do that. Right. So now they're not just sitting there doing almost nothing at practice. Now they could probably do a little bit more because now I know what's going on.
Right.
And again, you brought up a good question. Right. Or even just like if there's something on the injury report, like, hey, this is my initial thought of what's going on. If we have a conversation about like, hey, what are your goals? What do you need this person for? Does that align with what the athlete's kind of feeling? And is it safe to do so? Then we could probably work with that, because I'm trying to go off of what exactly the team's goal is and what I think, hey, this would probably give us the best. But if that's not aligning with your goals, and maybe the athlete's trying to align with the coach's goals too, right? Again, we could all get on the same page if just a question was asked.
Lastly, for communication purposes, printed schedules. And this doesn't just
please.
mean like out of the printer, like physical copies, but like, here, I'll just read. Anonymous says, I have 2 coaches that schedule everything out practically for the entire year. One has a Google calendar that I'm added to, and the other does a calendar of every month. Either I get a hard copy or a picture of it, and I plan according to their schedules. Luckily, my best communicators are football, wrestling, and boys lacrosse, which are my high-risk sports, so they get practice coverage, and everyone else might not since they never tell me when they're on campus.
Yeah, sure.
But here's the thing, too. I think you also, not anonymous, just in general, like I think people, athletic trainers have to also realize that some coaches don't think that it's necessary for an athletic trainer to be on campus or available during their practice, so they don't feel the need to communicate.
Yeah.
So like you can see where that communication barrier is.
Yeah.
So like finding a way to show your value so that they know it's important for you to be on campus, rather than you just telling them, like, you need to tell me when your practice is so I can be on campus, right?
Yeah.
I think it will make things a lot smoother.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, obviously.
Yeah. Also, the schedule everything out, like that's an NCAA thing. Like that's a rule. Like they have to, the coaches, at least at the D1 level, I can't speak to like if it's also the same rule for D2 or D3, but they actually have to schedule out the hours of their practice for the entire semester. And theoretically, they cannot change it unless it's approved by the compliance. They have to put it in writing that they are changing the hours of their practice. So I feel like it's going to start becoming more common that it's going to be asked for coaches more and more to at least have a general game plan. Here's what our practice is, right? Obviously, things happen. Things change. Coach might want to add another recovery day, right? Or like, coach is sick, or like something happens that there's going to be a change, and obviously that's going to happen. But if you can have like a general idea of here's what our semester is going to look like, that's going to be huge. And that's a good start for us to understand what our hours are going to look like, what each day is going to look like. So just food for thought.
Right. So shifting perspective, what positive traits have you heard from coaches that they like about the ATs that they work with?
I feel like it goes back to communication.
This entire episode, like literally across the board, communication. Yeah. And the thing about this one that a lot of athletic trainers talked about was straightforward communication about injuries and keeping it simple. Yeah. Not overcomplicating it, kind of just giving them the direct, like no sugarcoating, tell them how it is, tell them what they need to know, and keep it short. Yeah. Communication, just in general, was also another top one, but mostly about injuries. Injured athletes participating as much as possible, knowledge of a safe return / keeping athletes from re-injury.
That's what I think the injured, like keeping people participating. I think that has to be a balance between like obviously like a limited, like right, like not just holding people out, but making sure that like if they're having a restricted, like understanding that a restricted practice means they can do certain things, but it's not necessarily just like letting the kids go and just playing through pain. Like I think that's really tough for like some coaches who have like an older school mindset and want athletes to play through pain, because on the flip side, you can see it where when they needed them the most, that's where the athlete starts breaking down and things start accumulating.
So I think of this a little bit different. Like I see where you're going, like modification definitely. But also like when an athlete is not participating, like making sure they're not just like standing on the sideline or just like not interested, like make sure they're still being part of the, so like
For sure.
sometimes I'll have my athletes like, hey, make sure you go do your rehab like at practice, so like coach sees that you're like doing something, or like obviously when they're running plays, like go do your mental reps, like go watch, but like for the times that they're just doing like individual drills or like something that's like more like technique based that they can't do at that moment, like make sure that they are active or even on the bike or something that keeps them.
Agreed. So like I think that's the thing, that like the athlete can still be doing something. It doesn't have to necessarily be doing nothing, but it also, like for the coaches that kind of have that old school mentality of like, they would, athletes would have the old mindset of pushing through things. Like that's also not, that's going to be counterproductive to what the coach, I feel like, really wants. Of we're trying to get the athlete to perform at their best.
Being there in emergency, building the relationship as equals, mutual trust and collaboration.
Oh, and then sorry to go back to I was just thinking about going back to like, again, asking questions, like at like higher levels, like D1, right, where you have one team, you're probably out of practice, right? It's easy for the AT to handle that situation and like give them things to do that they can do while the team's practicing. There, maybe an athlete's not fully able to participate, but like at other levels, like high school, community college, where you have multiple teams, multiple athletes, where you're not at practice and you can't, like, it's really hard to give everyone something to do when you're not even out there. I think that's where like coaches asking questions. Well, what can this person do?
Right.
That's great, because it does. We do kind of like need the coach to kind of handle the person that's out, and like if the coach isn't happy that someone's not doing anything, well, it's also like they can do stuff, but I don't know what you're gonna do. And again, it goes back to that communication of if you ask questions about it, I can at least give better guidance on someone who's out,
right?
Because theoretically they can probably do something,
right? So what has helped ATs build relationships with coaches? The very, very, very top answer was building rapport outside of work talk, like getting to know them as a person. One of my favorite answers was anonymous: getting to know each other. ATs shouldn't be Grim Reapers.
Yeah, that's true. I do feel bad just delivering bad news all the time. Right.
I joke about it. Like, it's so easy to joke about. I'll be like, what? I was just coming over to say hi. Learn about what coaches do outside of practices and games, like office hours, recruiting, scheduling, etc. When appropriate, involve coaches in return to play decisions. For example, like I'll ask my coach when would be like the most ideal to have someone back. And then I can like adjust my return to play based on that, and then I can also give them insight, like, hey, I think that's a good goal, or like I'm gonna try for that, like, but honestly, like, don't expect that, you know. Or I can be like, hey, like, if we're not trying for this, like, I'm gonna take my time, and we're actually gonna be able to make a lot more headway with this injury if we have this like later goal, or so it does have an effect on what choices you're making and how much you're pushing them and how aggressive you're being.
For sure.
And obviously, like, even with the same person with the same injury or a re-injury, it's going to be different based upon those different factors. So
for sure.
And then lastly, taking opportunities to educate coaches on injuries.
Again, that's why questions.
Honestly, the biggest thing about working with amazing coaches is having an amazing relationship.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, just it makes it a lot easier, and like just having like just some mutual ground that you can actually just have a conversation with someone as opposed to like arguing or just talking to.
Because even like one of my coaches who I was talking about before, who like was not necessarily the perfect coach.
Yeah.
Like to work with on the AT end, like, because of my relationship with this person, like, it made it a lot easier to like call them out, right? If they were like, hey, like, dude, I'm not at campus yet, why are you practicing?
Yeah.
or like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because that relationship is really what, and obviously you're going to get those people who just understand it, larger than life. Like they are just, see coaching and see the value of athletic trainers and see all these things, that you don't have to like put in as much.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not necessarily like that's the only way that you're going to find a great coach.
For sure.
So if you guys are new, we do lots of different types of episodes. We do more episodes like this one where we take stories from athletic trainers about certain topics and kind of highlight and share experiences. We also do CU episodes or education episodes that Randy heads. He reads a bunch of articles. We kind of discuss it back and forth. And we also bring people on for some highlight interviews. So make sure you check out the rest of our episodes either through our website, any podcast directory that you guys listen to. You can watch on YouTube. If you guys are interested in more CEUs beyond what we offer, we do work with MedBridge, so you can use code ATCorner for $101 off a subscription. It is a reporting year. We can finally say that now. 2025 is a reporting year, so make sure you scroll down the show notes to check out that. And I think other than that, we're adding more CUs onto Clinically Pressed.
Yep.
So check those out. Thank you so much to our partner, Clinically Pressed and Athletic Training Chat. And I think that's it. You got anything else?
Nope, that's perfect. Thank you for helping us showcase athletic training behind the tape. Bye.